Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice-Burgh To Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. We finally made it. After a long offseason, an offseason that even the players are telling us was way too long, was way too drawn out. It's over. We've made it. The preseason, that's fine. Right? You get to see some hockey. You get to see Erik Karlsson, the first glimpses of what that looks like. You get a lot of storylines going on. Young Penguins, Braden Yeager's first camp. He's lighting it up in the WHL. It's fun, but it's not the regular season. It's not hockey being back. We finally made it. Today is the last day without NHL hockey in action. Yes, there's a couple days throughout the regular season that you won't see an NHL game, but realistically, hockey is back. The 2023-24 season begins in around 30 hours, depending on when you listen to this episode, and the Penguins couldn't be in a better place to start the season. They really couldn't, because while, yes, a lot of people, myself included, have said that this is the new era. This is a new era. I understand those that push back on that because at the end of the day, it's still the Crosby, Malkin, Letang era of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So let's put a little spin on that. Same era, different chapter. It's still a feeling of fresh air to start this season. Going into training camp, that was the feeling. And 2.5 weeks later, we're still there. The Penguins are in a solid spot. Camp has come to an end. The competition was exactly what the Penguins had hoped for. There were a lot of players that stepped up, a lot of players that impressed, and some players that played well and still didn't make the roster because others were performing at a higher capacity. That's what you wanted if you're the Penguins. Not only that, no injuries, really, to speak of. The only one that is through and through. Yes, there is a handful, 3 or 4 guys in the organization that spent the majority of training camp with the injured squad, Will Butcher being probably the most notable one close to the NHL, Owen Pickering being probably the most notable other than the guy we're going to talk about today. He at least got to practice with the Pittsburgh Penguins yesterday before likely being sent back to the WHL. He's been dealing with an injury again, and honestly, we can get into that a different date, but the kid needs to figure out a different offseason program because that's 2 years in a row that he missed most of training camp because of an offseason injury in workouts. But the only injury the Penguins really suffered in preseason was a slight little hiccup for P.O. Joseph at the Nova Scotia Showdown. He missed 1 practice, and he's back. So it's a great spot. It was a good training camp for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and now they could be getting Jake Guentzel back to start the season. I mean, things are looking up for the Pittsburgh Penguins to start the year. Vibes are as high as they can be for a team that is yet to hit the ice with 2 points actually on the line. Jake Guentzel had ankle surgery back on August 4th, and all of us were wondering, why wait? Why didn't you just get the ankle surgery? Because now, as we were told at that point, his timetable was 12 weeks, which would have put him out until October 27th, if that was accurate. And at the time, it was he's out 12 weeks, then will be reevaluated, making us think maybe there's a possibility we don't see him until the first week, second week of November. That's not a good thing for a team that desperately needs their top 6 to carry the load of scoring goals. And Jake Guentzel scores goals better than a lot of players in the National Hockey League, certainly better than a lot of players on the Pittsburgh Penguins as he's led the team the last 2 seasons. So we get that. And then we get Kyle Dubas coming back and pulling us back off the ledge a little bit, saying that he estimated that Guentzel would miss around 5 games. Not so fast. Not so fast. As we sit here today now, about 8 weeks later, Jake Guentzel looks really good. Jake Guentzel looks very much ahead of schedule. And Jake Guentzel yesterday continued practicing in full capacity with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He took all of the first-team power play reps And that's usually a pretty good indicator. The kid has been practicing since the first day of camp. That was the biggest surprise to me. The first day of camp, he was already out there with the injured players early in the morning skating. I said, okay, that's a good sign. But again, there is a long process, a long wind-up to getting players back, and especially with something like an ankle. You don't know how it's going to react once you start taking contact. Well, now, Jake Guentzel's been taking contact for a little over a week at Pittsburgh Penguins practice. He didn't play in any of the preseason games, and I don't think that's all that big of a deal, especially in hockey, where the preseason means not a whole lot. Yes, it would be nice to get him out there for power play reps in live action with this new power play that is going to take some time to build chemistry. But he is the net front guy, right? He is the net front guy, and he has been practicing out there over the past week with that. So, again, good signs. He's been practicing full capacity, and then after practice came the bombshell. Mike Sullivan drops it on the media and on the fan base. He says, here's an update for you. Jake Guentzel is day-to-day, which up until this point, it's been status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo, and that's what you get from Mike Sullivan. Not often do you get very many updates until right before the player returns, but yesterday he gave us day-to-day and game-time decision for Tuesday's opener against the Chicago Blackhawks. Boy, if that didn't put me in a stellar mood in the midst of watching a miserable game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They did win, but horrible watching experience. That put me in a good mood. Thinking, okay, this is huge. This is huge for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They needed this. Massive news. And I know, you may say, Nick, it was only going to be 5 games. It's an 82-game season. They have a lot of stars on the team. I mean, Sidney Crosby's still out there. Erik Karlsson is making his Penguins debut in a serious manner. Chris Letang's out there. Tristan Jarry's looked good. Shoot, Alex Nedeljkovic has looked good. It was only 5 games, Nick. It's not, I mean, it's great, but it's only 5 games. While I look at you and I say, listen, the Penguins, more than ever, need a solid start to the season. They need to build the base of which they're going to stack wins and get higher in the standings this year than last, because last year they finished outside of the playoffs. A feeling that Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang had never felt as a trio. A trio that is, starting tomorrow, going to have the record for the longest tenured trio in sports history, passing the New York Yankees. Of Jeter, Rivera, Posada. Last year was the only time in their career together that they had felt that disappointment of missing the postseason. Why is that? Because they were off balance from the start last season. Yes, they started the year 4-0-1. Tristan Jarry had his best start to a season of his career to that point. And then they went out and lost 7 straight, and 8 of the next 10. So there you go. You're 5 wins and 8 losses, something like that, to start the season. And it just continued like that on and off throughout the year. It set them on course to be that off-balance team all season long. They could never catch their footing. And at the end of the day, it cost them. 1 losing streak too long, 1 winning streak too short, and 1 point out of a playoff spot. And as the Panthers showed, and again, ifs and buts when candy and nuts, we'd all be, diabetic, whatever the saying is. But the Panthers showed all you had to do is make the playoffs and something can happen. We've seen that over the years. And a team with the experience like the Penguins, who knows what could have happened. But again, close that chapter. Open this new chapter with Kyle Dubas, with Erik Karlsson. The same thing remains. You need to get off to a good start in this league. Because the Penguins, while better equipped for a dogfight in the standings, should still strive to not put themselves in that position. And the only way to keep yourself out of that position is to build a base early and continue to stack wins. You can't get behind the 8 ball and then climb your way back. Not a team that's built like this. Not a team with 36-year-old Sidney Crosby. Not a team with 37-year-old Evgeny Malkin. Not a team with volatile goaltender Tristan Jarry that could be a world beater or could look like the world is beating crap out of him. This is not a team that should be comfortable getting off to a bad start. This is not a team that you should be comfortable watching get off to a bad start and thinking, okay, you know what? It's fine because it's Crosby, it's Malkin. They'll figure it out in the end. That was my thought process last year. And at the end of the day, the playoffs started and the Pittsburgh Penguins were on the golf course. They need to get off to a good start, if for no other reason than to avoid what happened last year. But also, they should take advantage of a somewhat light opening month. I think we've mentioned it a couple times on Tip of the Iceberg, maybe a couple times here on Ice-Burgh To Go, but 6 of the first 9 games of the season are at PPG Paints Arena. Not only that, but only 4 of the first 15 games of the season are against playoff teams from last year. You're playing a lot of teams that didn't make the postseason. And yes, the Pittsburgh Penguins are one of them. But you also have to remember they were the first team out. And this is an entirely new Pittsburgh Penguins team. Same might be able to be said for those 11 games where they played teams that didn't make the playoffs last year. But if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, if you're looking at it from this lens, it is vastly important to get off to a good start for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And getting Jake Guentzel back on the opening game instead of 5 games into the season, it just makes it that much better heading into the season, gives you that much more of a leg up, putting you on even ground than if he were to miss the first 5 games. And again, it's not guaranteed that he plays tomorrow, but if he doesn't play tomorrow, I would imagine he makes his debut either Friday against the Washington Capitals or Saturday against the Calgary Flames back in Pittsburgh. Either way, Jake Guentzel, ahead of schedule, should not miss the first 5 games of the season and could potentially play the first game of the season tomorrow night. It's insane. It's going to be a busy week here at Tip of the Iceberg because, well, the season begins. So keep an eye on InsideThePenguins.com for a lot of stories written by me, my co-host on Tip of the Iceberg, Nick Horwat, our other 2 writers, Jacob Puntori and Reese Comfort. We're going to give you all of the coverage that you could imagine and hope for the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. Also, podcast-wise, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins all season long. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts from all season long. Just search Tip of the Iceberg on your podcasting device or podcasting app or however you like to listen to it. Or like I mentioned, Inside the Penguins on YouTube. We have Tip of the Iceberg every Tuesday and Thursday. We have Ice-Burgh To Go pretty much every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And a new wrinkle that we're introducing, I'm going to try to keep up with it as much as possible. We're going to see how we can do it. Iceberg recaps after every single game, all 82, and hopefully into the postseason. Some of them will be night of, live on YouTube. Most of them, likely. We're going to try to do as many live as possible directly after the game, but most of them likely coming out early in the morning, the following morning with a subsequent piece on InsideThePenguins.com. So just make sure you're subscribed wherever you can find our content because we're going to try to come out with a lot of it this season. Speaking of that, talked about Jake Guentzel. NHL rosters are due by 5 p.m. today. We're going to have another short episode breaking down the Pittsburgh Penguins roster once it's finalized. 2 o'clock, we have waivers coming through, see who cleared. Penguins have 5 players on waivers currently, including Radim Zohorna, so we'll see what happens with that, but I'll be back later today to talk a little bit about the Penguins roster, and the season starts tomorrow, folks, so get excited. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember where you can find us. I just said it. I won't say it again, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's going to be a great season. We'll see you next time.